of the Board of Education, and I'm so pleased that she is now a member of the Connecticut State Board of Education, Andrea Comer. And the one that I heard I need to look out for, Tiana Hercules, West Hartford Middle School PTO, Tiana Hercules. West Middle, excuse me, West Middle. Now, by the way, when I was introduced, I did not get the kind of applause that my panelist members got. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let's have a lot of enthusiasm tonight, and let's just really pay attention to these experts, and feel free to write down your questions because there'll be a time when I'm going to call on you. The only person who knows exactly how we're going to start out is Bob Rader. I've asked him to give an executive summary, like a 2-3 minute max, Bob, 2-3 minute max, executive summary of what the role of a Board of Education is.
Well, that's fine, and I thank you, John.
Yes, I'm glad that's fine, Bob. I don't need that. Just do what I ask you to do, Bob, please.
I'll do my best, John.
Okay.
A Board of Education is elected by the people of the community to represent the community in the education of their children. Started out with the legislature being delegated the authority to act in education years and years ago, and they turned it over to boards of education. We have about 169 boards of education in the state, including the one in Hartford. And there are three basic things that boards do. You know, they work together. That's not one of them, but they have to work together. And it's crucial that people understand that, because if you're lucky enough to get elected to a Board of Education, you only have power when you work with everybody else on the board. You know, we vote. You've seen 4-3 votes, 5-4 votes. You've seen all kinds of different votes, but the truth is that the power of the board only, and the power of the individual board members only exists when they're sitting at the table. Three most important jobs: hiring, evaluating, if necessary, terminating the superintendent of schools. Superintendent of schools is really the only employee of the board. Now, we understand that teachers, principals, assistant superintendents, others work for the Board of Education, but the real employee, the one who has to funnel the decisions of the board down, is the superintendent. So that's the first responsibility of the board. Second responsibility of the board is to adopt policies. Policies are very similar to what the legislature does. In other words, the legislature sets policy by adopting legislation, specific laws on various subjects. Board of Education does the same thing for the school district. It sets policies which say, you know, what attendance has to be, what kind of school discipline there will be, how we deal with people who are not involved in collective bargaining agreements, those kind of issues. That's the second job of a Board of Education. And the third job is to adopt the budget. Now, we understand in virtually all of the school districts across the state, the Board of Education budget is not necessarily the final decision of the district. There's no independent taxing authority, as there are in many, many other states. So the board has to go to the city council, especially in Hartford, or a town council in other districts, to get the budget adopted. But those are the three main jobs of a Board of Education, John.
Thank you, Bob. Excellent, excellent. You ran about 30 seconds over, and I'm going to allow that this time, Bob. But I wanted to call on one of the former members of a Board of Education to speak to how they viewed how things actually work during their term of service, opposite what Bob said is the proper role of board members. Andrea, will you start off?
Sure. So Again, thank you all for coming out and braving the weather. And since we're talking about boards of education, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Robert Cotto, who is on the Hartford Board of Education now.
Excuse me. I asked you to do something very specific, Andrea. I was going to recognize Dr. Cotto myself later in the program. Now, if that's okay, just don't let these things happen, panelists, okay? Carry on now.
I didn't listen to my parents either. I guess the only difference I would say with the Hartford Board of Education is that there are 4 elected members, there are 5 appointed members for our Board of Education, so not everyone is chosen by the voters. The mayor actually selects 5 of the members of the Hartford Board of Ed. We did also approve, we'd have a budget that would then go on to the city council that would be approved. The principal selection, like you said, does come through the superintendent, but they have to be approved by the Board of Education. And during my time on the board, we had a different superintendent than is in place now. And one of the things that he did, it was Stephen Adamowski, and he spent a considerable amount of time getting us organized around a theory of change. And I think that was really important because it forced us to have a single collective vision in terms of how we were going to develop policy for the schools. And I think to your point about us acting as one, that was a really important step that he took.
Very good. Candida, I'm going to ask you to take a slightly different take, and that would be start with where Andrea ended. Individuals, what roles, responsibility do individual board members have versus the board as a collective?
Sure, I can talk. You're not going to bite my head.
No, yes, I'm going to allow you to talk.
I'm afraid now.
Really. Yes, appropriately so, yes.
Isn't she out of time yet, John?
Yes.
Well, we are elected by the people. Back then, by the way, no one was appointed. Everybody was elected. Somebody would be appointed if a board member would step out, so somebody would be appointed to complete the term of that individual. And so you come into with a commitment to speak the voice of the people. It is not your personal interest, it's not your personal views that prevail during the deliberations. You're there to represent the people of the district that you're running in, and you need to listen to the people and then bring that voice into the decision-making process. Hopefully you get to do that in an amicable, way with your colleagues at the table. That doesn't happen all the time, but that is your obligation to make sure that the voice of the people is brought in a clear, loud way, so that the interests of the people are served.
Let's bring the parents in on the conversation now. I'll start with you, Nancy. Are you a member of any of the governing councils? Or yes, I'm just talking to the camera now. See, I'm trained in TV, and so where is the camera, by the way? Nancy, are you a member of any of the governing councils, PTO or the governing council? And if so, could you speak about your role in those areas opposite some of the things that have been discussed about the role of the board as a whole or in individuals?
Thank you.
To speak to the camera, yes.
That's the problem when you're short. It's like it's so out of reach. Up until a month ago, I was the secretary of the PTO organization at Moyna Montessori. And we became Magnet, and it's now called Montessori Magnet School. My role I served 2 years on that board, and our role was to really kind of bring the community together for the most part, doing activities that benefited our children, that encourage success and unity, and trying to reach out to the parents and allow them to feel part of the school. One of the differences that I see, I think when I look at the Board of Education, there's some kind of separation in a sense of I think they focus on the people that voted them. I think they not focusing on the children and a lot of the decisions that are being made. As part of the PTA, I also been very involved in attending the Board of Education meetings, and I've noticed a difference also in the sense of, as a PTO member, we were always at the meetings. You know, we were the ones that carried the meeting. At the Board of Education meetings, a lot of the members are not present. And I find that how can they make a decision when they're not there? You know,
Okay, so it's important that if any of you are candidates for the board, it's important if you're elected or if you're selected that you show up, that you come prepared, and that you communicate with people, all different types, parents, etc., not interfere with the teachers and administration, but become knowledgeable about what's going on. But it's very important that you show up. Thank you for making that point. Now, I want to just make a point that we're not talking about the present board. We're talking in general about what the general board members' duties are and the role of the board. Now, let's go to you, Nancy. Could you could you talk about your role?
Yes.
Are you talking about my senior moments or something?
Oh, gosh.
I will not have that. I just won't stand for it. Okay, now, where were we? Nancy, could you talk about your role as a parent? I'm sorry, Tiana.
Yeah,
could you
thank
talk about your role as a parent and whether or not you serve on any of the governing boards or how you interact with the Board of Education?
Thank
I
you.
think I have you two straight now.
Thank you.
Tiana and Nancy.
Thank you. I echo a lot of what Nancy said. I sit on both the PTO and the School Governance Council, and as being a year into this Hartford Public School District, I sometimes get the two a little intertwined. But the best way I can kind of describe the two functions, which are very important, is I really perceive the PTO function, at least my role in it, is really to forge better partnerships between the parents, the teachers, and the administration in the school as a way to effectuate student outcomes in a positive way. So, like Nancy said, any type of positive activities that enhance student outcomes in the school, that is the role of the PTO. Also to at least I believe in my role as a PTO, we did an action plan for the Title I Parent Involvement Funds, which are the monies that come to schools through the School Reform Act, as we are a district that receives Title I funding, and it's 1% of that budget is separated and allocated between all the schools, and those funds are strictly for parent involvement, parent engagement activities. And so PTOs submit an action plan to the principal, which the principal can then approve, and that's how those monies are spent. So that's one of the most effective ways for parents to really exercise their power and to be engaged, because they are the ones on the ground working with the teachers, seeing where the gaps are, where the needs are. If it's literacy, you can have literacy nights. If it's math, that's the issue, you can have math nights, go on field trips. So those funds really allow parents, a vehicle for parents to become involved and engaged. So that's the PTO. The way that I interface with the board through the PTO is really to bring I'm sorry, I do speak very fast, I apologize. The way that I interface with the Board of Education in my role as a PTO is to bring issues of concern and to represent the parent in the school. So to be that voice, like Nancy said, at the Board of Education meetings. So a way that you acquiesce to things that are not great in your community is by not saying anything, by not speaking up, by being silent. And so by using your voice and putting a spotlight on issues that are critical, there's nothing more important than our children's education. That's how you can make sure that action is taken. And if it's not, you continue to come to those meetings. You galvanize other parents, you galvanize other community members. So that's the best way to interface, I think, with the board through the PTO. The School Government Council, which is pretty new to our state, I believe 3 years, right, since 2010 with the school reform through legislation. So the School Government Council is a more broader body of parents, teachers, and community members that really govern and provide oversight for the school. So they are able to make decisions. They're supposed to be involved in the hiring of principals, hiring of other administrators, signing off on the budget, so some fiscal and policy oversight with respect to the schools. What else do they do? I think that's their biggest, looking at the school achievement data. That's critical. That is a critical role that the school governance councils plays. So in July, when the test results come out, you are supposed to be looking at the data, asking the critical questions, why aren't students improving? And then, of course, interfacing with the board to say, hey, what's up? What's going on? Students are not improving along, the trajectory that they should have, and, being engaged in that way. So those are that's how, I function in those two roles, which again, they sometimes get overlapped, but that's how parents can really, and students also, be involved in ensure that their voice is being represented in the critical decision-making process.
Thank you very much. I went to church last Sunday, and at the sermon, the pastor gave 3 false endings. And they kept saying, and I'm about to close, and it reminded me of you, Tiana. I thought you were about to close 3 different times. But let's go back to one of the things that you talked about, and then we're just going to break that down. And that was that. Bless you. Sneezing is not allowed in my forums. Please take your sneezings outside. No, please. Let's talk about money from the big picture standpoint. Bob, talk about the role of you mentioned one of the 3 main responsibilities of the board is to approve the budget. Let's talk about that a little more on the big picture, then we'll get into details a little more.
Well, obviously in Connecticut, we get about 35% of the funding of school districts across the state comes from the state. About 7% comes from the federal government. The rest is raised locally. Now, in a city like Hartford, because of poverty and wealth factors, Hartford gets much more of its money from the state. It gets it in.
Pause there for just a second.
Sure.
In the city's budget, Andrea, what's your feelings? The percent of the city's budget that education takes?
It's more than half. I think it's probably around, I've heard 51 and I've heard 54%.
Close enough. The bottom line is over half of the budget of the city of Hartford goes to education. So continue, Bob. Thank you.
And that's probably true across the state.
Bob, we don't care about that. We just.
My role is to care about that,
okay,
John.
Fine,
sorry.
Fine. But you're on my panel, Bob. Okay.
So that's where the revenues come from. Obviously, we all know about how overtaxed many of our people across the state are, especially in the cities, how the state has not funded near what was a goal of 50%, and that has certainly cut back efforts to raise student achievement and to do a lot of the things that Hartford, as well as other cities and suburban and rural districts would like to do as well.
John?
Yes.
Can I say something? Because I think, I'm going back to the 90s when the dinosaurs still roamed the earth. The parents have come an incredibly long way. There's still a long way to go. But back then, it was unheard of that parents were involved in any way, shape, or form in determining, making budget decisions. So it works. I mean, when you advocate for your involvement in education and you become involved, this is the result. You get to make those kinds of decisions.
When you come in late, you don't get the chance to say hello and hug people. You just come in, take a seat. Okay, carry on.
So do advocate, and so get involved, because you will get to make these decisions. I mean, that you see it here, and that's very important.
Thank
Money
you.
determines a lot.
Now, last year, the Board of Education had a special session dedicated for parents, residents who understand the budget. I attended that session, and Dr. Cotto, if I'm correct, there was only one question at that session, maybe 2, about the budget. Is that your recollection? So I think that one thing that I think that we need to do a better job of is presenting an information on a very complex subject, finance, in a way that parents can understand, in the way that our citizens can understand. So I think that is a challenge to all of these great sponsors of this forum. We need to break down the numbers so people can really understand what they mean and the decisions that the board is called upon to make. because as we allocate resources, in part dictates, I think, the outcomes.
Yep.
Speaking of outcomes, student achievement. Would you agree that that is one thing that we're still struggling to get our students to achieve uniformly at a high level? And if so, what role do you see as the board and you as a leader playing?
Student achievement is the number one focus of everybody that comes in contact with a child.
I was reading her notes, and that's why I knew that that was very important to her. Yes.
Absolutely. I think if there's no true partnership between the community, and community being everybody in the family, and the administration, the teachers, and presenting that to the board, if there's no unity and that focus of a student achievement, we're never going to get there. Because when we get to meetings where we're trying to talk about those subjects, we always tend to deviate from the subject that, that's important. There are a lot of issues that come up in regards to parent engagement, and there's always trying to put the fault on somebody. Oh, the parents don't want to be engaged, or the teachers don't want to take the time and engage the parents or the families. In reality, it's like everybody should really focus that the child is the one that needs, not myself. I don't need to feel like, oh, I got 3 emails this week. But really, if I got 3 emails, or I got just one, or 1 phone call, what it is about, and really give it the importance that entails. That if they're calling me because my child for some reason appears to be absent the day, or didn't complete an assignment, or on the other aspect, they're very well in something and they want to give them an award, and they want to see parents there to support your child. So we all need to pay attention to those little communications that come in pieces, so that we all take part into the child's success.
Excellent. Let's talk, and we're switching back and forth as topics come up, but this whole issue about the board's responsibility in policy. Break that down, Andrea. How does the board establishing policy, and how do you do that, and what kind of things do you consider, and what is the impact of that at the ground level?
So I think, there's a lot of different ways I think that policy implements. I can talk specifically about when I was on the board, and we developed the school uniform policy during that time. We took a really hard look at suspension data at that time. I think we need to take another look at it at this point as a district, because there's some suspension issues going on. So how it impacts on the ground, I think that if you look at data in terms of how students are doing, then you figure out where they're doing well, how they're not doing well, what are some of the things that impact that student achievement, and then you develop the policies around that. So the school uniform policy was developed in large part because it felt like kids having to figure out, are they wearing the cool sneakers, or do they have the newest fashions, was a distraction. And if everybody was wearing the same thing, and everybody had sort of a same sort of, everybody at the school looked the same in terms of dress, that it would take that distraction away, maybe allow. Did it work? I've heard mixed results in terms of whether or not that was a good thing, and I like to remain teachable. In terms of developing a portfolio district, that was around creating different school options for parents, because what may work for one parent and one child may not work for another parent and another child. So those are the kinds of policies that I think get developed and that the board decides in the ultimate goal of addressing student achievement. I can just take 1 minute to talk to you about, you talked about parents, and people always want to say, well, the parents don't want to get involved. We have to understand that we need to meet parents where they're at. So working in the school where I've worked, I've come across parents who come at you very angry sometimes. And it really is about them just feeling really passionate about wanting what's best for their kids and not always necessarily being able to communicate that and not understanding what it is that we're trying to do. So sometimes we want to send home a flyer or send home a communication and think that we've done our job. But for an education system that has been failing for a while now, we have to think about those parents who may have literacy issues. And so you can send whatever home you want, but if they can't read it, then they're not going to understand. So, and I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do. It's very, very difficult. But if we're going to hold parents responsible, we also have to be willing to acknowledge that there are some parents we're going to be able to reach one way, and other parents we're going to have to really just do some real face-to-face, I'm going to go and knock on your door or get you wherever I can get you so we can have a conversation about what's best for your child.
Thank you. Tiana, how many children do you have in the Hartford Public School System? And I assume that it's your children or child or children, it's because of them that you got involved. Could you talk to that, please?
Sure. I have two children. My husband and I have two children in the Hartford Public School System. We have a 5-year-old who is going to first grade, and we have an 8-year-old who is going to fourth grade.
They both in the same school?
Both go to West Middle School. My 5-year-old, he's reading on a second grade reading level, and he is incredibly bright child who loves to learn. My 8-year-old as well loves to learn. But one thing I have noticed we've moved from New London is where I'm from, to Wyndham, and now to Hartford. I don't know if it's just his age, being that he's going to fourth grade, he's 8, he's on the cusp of thinking he knows everything. But I have noticed kind of picking up certain habits, becoming less engaged in school, and that's something that has certainly concerned me as a parent, because he at one point loved to learn. And so something that I've been really trying to advocate for at my school is the importance of experiential learning, the importance of not just lecturing to students, to really challenge their thinking and really get them involved and engaged in how they're learning. Sitting in a seat for several hours does not work for all students, especially those who are intellectually curious and really ask questions. He's not the type of student who wants to always raise his hand, and I try to tell him you gotta not do that, but he wants to challenge, he wants to know why. And so I feel that teachers, at least the teachers I interacted, are great, but there's a kind of an archaic way that we teach in the school district, and I think because we have such dynamic students, we need to learn how to really, again, meet them where they are and adapt to the way that they're going to learn best, because the product is no good if the person you're trying to sell it to doesn't want it, right? And so you have to learn how to package your product in a way that is going to be useful for the consumer, and our students are our most important consumers. So
thank you very much.
Yeah.
You notice I went for that pause. There was a little pause, and I went for it.
You're lucky, because I would have kept
going.
Yes,
I know. You were about to go to something else, weren't you?
I was.
Yes, I know. All right. I'm going to just take a moment of personal privilege and just say 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of teaching history to the 9th graders at Achievement First. And several of them saw me later that night and told me it was the best history class that they had ever had.
Awesome.
This is how they acknowledge. They snap their fingers into the clap. You can snap your fingers in approval.
Right.
I used to think that was the weirdest thing, but now I love it because they snap their fingers all through my course.
They learn anything.
Well, that's another question. I bribed them, frankly. Now, Nancy, do you have children in the school system now, or did you earlier? And could you talk about your experience as a mother and as a leader?
Thank you. I do have 2 children in the school system. I have a 14-year-old that's starting 9th grade in the fall, and I have
in what school?
Global Communications Academy. And I have a 6-year-old that is Montessori Magnet, and he's the equivalent of 2nd grade for next year. Montessori is a little different, and it's a multi-age environment. And the children are taught individual lessons. They're not, the teacher standing in front of the class and expecting everybody to listen and be attentive at the same time and be learning at the same pace. So it's very conducive to the individualized learning. The curiosity gets the answer much easier for them. They're able to focus differently. So when I was even doing my research for schools for my children, like I try to find the schools that provided the way of teaching that matched their interests. And with the little one, I knew from very early on he spoke 2 languages from birth, and he was very inquisitive about everything, and he loved nature, so it allowed me to look at those options. It also gives me the opportunity to be involved in the school because I'm able to really like what I see, you know, and the results that I get from my son, and I'm able to advocate for him too. Like when he was, you know, children usually go through stages where their behavior goes like this, especially with boys. So when I had that issue where like he was having those ups and downs, I was able to communicate with the teacher, and she was able to give me ideas on how to communicate with him, and give him different options of, you know, I could get him to do the same thing, just ask him differently, you know.
Very good.
So it's good. It was a good way to communication.
Excellent.
With the teacher.
And at this moment, I just want to pause and recognize the presence of City Council member David McDonald, who's a former long-term member of the school board, and is also a long-time chairman. So, David, thank you for your long service to the city and to education. Now let's applaud David. You interrupted me mid-introduction. Let's applaud David. Thank you. Are there any other elected officials here? Okay, moving right along. How does a person in Hartford get appointed or elected? Let's start with elected. Were you elected or appointed?
I was elected.
You were what?
Elected.
You were elected. Tell me about that. How did you decide to run, and how did you go about getting elected?
When I came from Puerto Rico back in early 1980, I came with 5 school-aged daughters, and they were all monolinguals. So the first thing that the Board of Education wanted to cut when there were budget problems was the bilingual education. And so I got an interest in advocating for bilingual education. So I went to Colorado to climb a mountain, and I climbed the mountain, and when I came back, some leaders in the community asked me if I wanted to run for the Board of Education. I said, sure, no problem. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to be inside to be able to have a bigger impact in the decisions that were affecting my daughters at the time. So you decide to run, you have to fill a number of a petition with number of signatures that are required, register with the city clerk, establish a committee for the election process, and run a campaign. And if you're lucky enough to win, then you become a member of the Board of Education. It is a lengthy process. It is a little bit of a chaotic process, because the political process in any city, but especially in the city of Hartford, sometimes gets down to the gutters, and people forget that people running for elected official positions are people, with feelings and families and interests, and sometimes we were not treated as such. So you really put a lot on the table when you make that decision to run for public office, a lot on the table. But it's a sacrifice, and it's an investment that you make to society to pay back, and I don't regret it. I was on the board for 4 years. I gained 50 pounds that I never shed back because of the long meetings and the stress and all that comes with it. But I don't regret it, because I think I was able to make a difference.
Thank you. Andrea, you were elected, as I recall.
Yes.
And as my memory is correct, you were the leading vote getter in that year.
Whatever that's worth.
As a matter of fact, I was at what is now Firebox when the election returns came in. But tell us about why you decided to run, and end with giving advice to anyone who is thinking about running for office or trying to be appointed. What advice would you give to them?
So I got involved in the Board of Education. I blame two people in particular, former Councilman Steve Harris and Clark King, who was president of the 1716 Union. They had approached me. They knew I had spent a lot of time working with young people and said, would you consider running for the Board of Ed? And I said, sure, that'd be a great way to advocate for kids. Having no idea, to Candida's point, that you really do put yourself out there. People will come at you all kinds of ways during the election process. Once you get elected, my advice would be, but I did it because, again, you want to be able to make a difference. My daughter was in the school system at the time. And it's the Hartford Public Schools is like this huge, enormous octopus of layers and bureaucracy, and it's really, really tough for parents to navigate. And so I wanted to be able to be a voice for them, so that if they had an issue, that they could come to me, and I could try and clear brush. And I'd like to think that in some ways I did that. My advice to anybody who's thinking about running: have a really thick skin. Drink lots of Red Bull.
This is not medical advice, by the way. We're
I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
And just don't ever stop, even whether you're elected or appointed, don't ever stop listening to the community, because at the end of the day, that's why you're there. You're there to be a messenger and be a liaison for the community. And the minute you lose sight of that, I think you need to reassess whether or not you should be there.
If I might add, because I think this is an important point.
No one speaks until I tell them it's okay. Yes, Candia Flores.
When you do this for your children and for the rest of the children in the community, and in the process, unfortunately, your children get hurt.
Yes.
My children were really hurt in the entire process. I mean, they were bullied by teachers, by students, by others, because I was making decisions that were not popular. And so these are the kinds of things that, we had to endure, and, still some board members have to endure. So we have to keep that in mind, that, those sensitivities have to be in place. Otherwise, you're not going to get honest, good people to run for these positions, because it is tough, really tough, on the children of the people who run for those positions.
Bob, you're having broad exposure to school boards across the state. Is there something that we need to talk about tonight before I turn things over to the audience for their questions?
Specifically, we need great people to run for boards of education across the state. The job is too important, and we're moving towards a different kind of community in which, by the year 2043, and this is across the country, I don't have the statistics for Connecticut specifically, but we know that this will, by 2043, be a country where it's a majority of the people will be minorities. There will be people of color. And we have to make sure that we bring them in, make sure they feel welcome, want to be a part of the political process, and be able to understand it and really get a feel for doing it. So I applaud Hartford, which has been able to bring minorities into the Board of Education. It's not true in all school districts, but we have to develop more sensitivity. I've been working on that. I've also been working on some of the other issues that are affecting boards of education. The federal government has become much more involved. We had Race to the Top, even though we didn't get any of the money. We still have things that we have to do. There's Common Core state standards, which is going to affect every school district, every student, every teacher. So there are a lot of different things. And I'd encourage you, if you're thinking about joining a board, we, at the end of September, are going to do a workshop at CREC in Hartford talking about the role of the board and some of these other issues. So please think about coming. Go to our website, www.cabe.org, and there is a lot of very good information about what it means to be a board member. Maybe not specifically in Hartford, but a lot of the issues that come up across the state, like those I mentioned, like ethics, like other things that have to be thought about, can be found right on our website.
Are there any other commercials that we need to put in right now?
It was a commercial.
That's fine, that's fine, Bob. I just want to give equal opportunity. Any other commercials? Yes?
I would just say for those who are running for the board, and just echoing what was said by Candida and Andrea, you have to keep the community, of course, but the children as your true north. I mean, that is what it's all about. And I think at the fundamental basis, everyone on the board wants what's best for children. Obviously, the way that we get there differs, but even though it's a political process, keeping the politics out of it and really keeping the eye on the prize, which is the children. If that is your guiding post, I think you will be golden.
All right. Let's give all of the panelists a big round of applause, please. And now let's give a separate round of applause to the moderator. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so modest. But also, let's thank our translator. He had tough work, tough duty today, but thank you for translating. And now, audience, it's your turn. We have a roving microphone, so if you have a burning question for any of the panelists, just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you, right here.
Hello.
Please stand up, give us your name, and et cetera.
Hello, my name is Brittany, and I'm an intern at the Community Voter Project. And
let's give Brittany a hand. Yes, thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Brittany, where are you in school?
I just finished UConn. I just graduated, so.
Excellent, excellent. Carry on.
I just have a question about standardized testing. I know for me, when I was in school, one of the most stressful parts was not necessarily the SATs, but the CAP testing that you took in sophomore year, because there was so much pressure put on you because you felt like you could not graduate if you didn't pass. And although people rarely didn't pass after taking it twice, it just created an excruciating amount of pressure for me. And so I just wanted to know, what was the justification for placing so much pressure or so much emphasis on that one test over other criteria such as GPA?
Who would like to take that?
Bob.
Well, certainly over the last few years, the CMT and the CAP have been very important. As a matter of fact, the CAP was the single best indicator of how somebody would do in college and if they were ready for college. We're now actually moving away from CAP and CMT. I mentioned the Common Core state standards. There are tests that are going to be part of that too. I don't know that there'll be a lot less stress. I'd love to say there would be. I don't think the idea is to create the stress. It's really to get a good feeling for what are kids learning. Are they ready to go to higher education, into the workplace? So there's always going to be some kind of stress on that. How it will count as far as graduation is still undetermined.
Now, I'm just going to pause here and just note one thing. The 80-20 rule is in effect in this place. 80% of the audience here is female. 80%. We have to work hard, starting at the early age, to save our boys and engage our men, because 80% of people in this room are women. And that's kind of typical about a lot of forums involving education. It's predominantly women. We must get our men engaged and involved and out. Other questions? There's a man. Give that mic to the man. Hallelujah. Let's give him a hand.
My name is Levy Cardulis. I wear many hats in the city. My kids go to the school district here in Hartford. one of the issues that I have currently with the way we do our Board of Education here in Hartford is it's a 5-4 split. And as a prime voter, as a registered voter, and I don't care if it's a bond issue, I'm going to be there. I feel like my voice is minimized when my elected officials are outnumbered by the appointed officials. And that's a major problem here in Hartford. And I would like to see us, I don't know if I'm addressing this to any one member, but this is something that we have to start moving away from, I think, for us to be an effective community. Because when I look around in my surrounding towns in Greater Hartford, how many people are appointed to those Board of Educations? Exact my point. None. Zero. And then in Hartford, it doesn't make a difference what the people want.
Right.
Because we have one person that's in control of everything, and that's going to make sure that it's a 5-4 vote. Also, in the end, you do not remember the words of your enemies, but the silence of your friends. Tiana, we all have an obligation in this town to speak up and come to these board meetings, city council meetings, and speak up for our children, our neighbor's child as well. Thank you.
And there's a man who attends meetings often and often stands up. So let's give him another hand. Thank you.
Can I just say something about that?
Yes, you may.
The board makeup, and I believe, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, I think. So the Charter Revision Commission, so the change in the Board of Education was a result of revising the charter. I think they're going through that process again. I don't know if they've made a recommendation about changing it back or not.
David, do you know?
So, but I'm not sure.
No recommendation yet? Okay. But it is under review.
Yeah, that's one of the things that they were looking at. I mean, I think that, and I don't want to believe that every appointed member of the board somehow checks out with regard to what the community wants. I'd like to think that they're still open. I'm sort of on the fence, to be honest, as an elected member and someone who is also a prime voter. I struggle sometimes because I do feel like so you get somebody that is elected, and then are they responding to the community, or are they responding to the constituency that got them in there? And I don't, it's an ongoing conversation.
Okay, all right. We're not gonna have a debate, Mr. Cadulas. But let me just make this statement. Let me just make this statement, please. Yes. I just want to acknowledge that one of the the appointed members of the board, Richard Waring, was here earlier. Now, we have other questions.
My name is Jenny Jarina. I'm an advocate, graduate of AU, and we recently had a PLTI, is it Parent Leadership Training graduate. My question is, a parent approached me out there as an advocate and said, what is going on in Hartford? They're closing 3 schools up in the hillside area, Frog Hollow. They're going to combine them with other. I don't know if they can't fund the schools and they're just going to put them with the other children. This is a comment that I heard. And the basketball team is being moved to Waterbury because of the high taxes in Hartford. So I told her, well, you need to get a hold of the parents and go to the board meetings and speak on this, because I wasn't aware of that. That's something that's going on with the budget. Because I remember a couple years ago in Middletown, $1 million was missing and they never found out what happened to it. But what it is, they need to audit and see what's going on with the management and risk management of funding. Because these people come to you and then you don't know what to tell them, because I don't know what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, I think that the basketball team that you're referring to is the Pro-Am, which is not connected to the Hartford Public Schools, but it's run actually by a friend of several friends of ours. So if I had to predict, the Pro-Am will be back in Hartford next year. But interesting enough, I think that what happens in our schools in terms of extracurricular activities, whether it's athletics or music or art, is something that we all should keep our eye on, because I think that's part of the educational process, is to really interest students in things in addition to the academics. I think that some of us were able to get through school, and I use that word deliberately, in part because we were engaged in other things. You probably look at me and you probably can't tell that I was not a basketball player. I was a trumpet player. You can't tell that. Any other questions? Can I dance? Oh, yes, yes. I was the first trumpet, yes. And no, I can't dance. Which doesn't stop me from trying. Yes.
Hi, yes, good evening. My name is Damaris Boloring, and my question is simply geared towards each and every one of you, and that has to do with the fact that so the parents can have time to get out of work at 5, depending where they work at, and make it there. Because parents do want to
thank you. And if I'm correct, the board meetings do start at 5:30, and Dr. Cotto, is that correct? Most of them start at 5:30 now, so it might have started at 5 earlier, but that has been changed already to 5:30, which still might be too early. But I will say this about the board meetings. I, again, applaud all of those who serve, because sometimes, even though the board meetings are supposed to start at 5:30, they don't start really till 6, and they are there often till 11 or 12 o'clock at night. So let's give both Dave McDonald and Dr. Cotto another hand for their service, because they put in an extraordinary amount of time serving our children. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Mariah, and I'm also with the the Community Voter Project. I just have a quick question. I heard you say...
Hold the mic steady there. I notice you use your hands a lot.
Yeah.
You can't use that right hand other than to hold the mic steady there. Yes.
Okay, so I heard you earlier talking about there being a separate fund for parent activities and for them to be incorporated in those things. And I'm sure plenty of parents are aware of those, but there's a huge chunk of parents who do not know that those activities and those funds are available for them. What measures are we taking to make them aware of the accessibility that they have to their children?
Yeah, so the principal is responsible for communicating.
No one speaks until I call their name.
Sorry.
Yes, Tiana, please take that question.
Thank you. The principal is responsible for communicating that to the parents in the schools, specifically the PTO. The Hartford school, Hartford district has been doing a better job at having, I guess, quarterly meetings where they go over how many parent involvement funds are left in the Title I fund per school. But you'll see you have to use them before the fiscal year ends, before July comes, and there's lots of money left over. So we could do a lot better job collectively at communicating that to parents, because that is money that if you don't use it, it goes away. So it doesn't like carry over to next year. It's just gone. I don't know where it goes, but it just goes away. And so it's a powerful tool, like I said, for parents to become involved and really implement activities that could be scaled up and replicated in the school that they feel would impact their students in a positive way. So I think, communication is it's an issue in the Hartford Public Schools, and so I think parents who do know, like us, we get the word out as much as we can, but we could always do a better job at communicating that.
Thank you. Let's go to Joe. Every time a man raises his hand, I'm going to call on him. I'll tell you that right now. Okay. Okay, fine. You're next.
Estrogen discrimination.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. I owe you a hug.
Yes, yes. Anybody wants to hug me later, just line up outside, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Gonzalez. My question is either for Claudia or Andrea or Candida.
Andrea. Candida.
Tiana mentioned early that she has a kind of a problem when she brought her son from another school district into a Hartford school district. I had the same problem too. For you guys as a board members, what the Hartford Board of Education system can do to minimize that problem?
Okay, no one here is on the board, and we don't want you to direct. This is a general question, which we'll take it as a general question. What should board members of the board do to minimize the transition issues of someone moving into area? Bob, maybe you could speak to that.
Well, it's always a challenge. It's especially challenged in a community like Hartford, where there are so many different people moving in and out of the district all the time. I don't have any great answers. It's got
Okay, thank you, Bob. Next,
it's got to be school by school and community by community within the district. Certainly, one of the best places to get a start on really understanding things, whether it's the finances as we talked about, or student achievement, which is full of jargon from educators, is to get involved in your school governance councils. And I know that Leadership Greater Hartford has done a great job in Hartford teaching about what it means to be on a school governance council and what these various things mean. But as far as actually what should happen in each school, that really depends on the policy of the district, the resources available, and frankly, the willingness of administrators.
Candida, did you want to speak to that?
But there could be some type of a uniform creed, for lack of a better word, that everybody follows, that understanding that this is the way that we welcome people into our system. You know, it doesn't have to be a law, but it could be something that everybody understands and obeys as a matter of principle, because that doesn't exist, and everybody uses their own judgment sometimes, or implements their own way. And so having something overall that says our district welcomes people into our system in this way.
That's a policy.
Yeah.
And that
Absolutely.
certainly could be done.
I think we have time for just several more. You are next. Yes, indeed.
Hi. My question is to Bob.
Who are you?
Or I'm Myra Esquilin.
Yes, indeed, yes.
You mentioned the notion of a diverse community being developed. Is there any state policy or any other policy that requires translation at Board of Education meetings? I mean, I've attended several meetings. I mean, I think the Hartford Votes Coalition kind of goes beyond in terms of getting translation equipment and a translator and to be able to engage at least the Latino community to participate. But at board meetings, time after time, I've seen Spanish-speaking or monolingual individuals come up to want to address the board, and a staff person from the board might be providing the translation, but that's really not their job. So I always worry about people who are translating who are not translators. Is there any policy that requires translation to be provided?
No. As far as I know, the only kind of translation needing to be provided is if somebody has a disability, you know, they're deaf. Very often they will ask for that specifically, and we've had a board member who was deaf, and the district had to provide, it wasn't in Hartford, but had to provide an interpreter. But I do not believe it's necessary, but it might be something that the board wants to think about. Many boards should think about it, especially as we become more diverse. There's a sensitivity that's needed to who's in your community.
Nancy, how much more time do we have?
It's Linda.
Linda. Yes. No, I was talking to Nancy, actually. Yes.
Everybody's Nancy.
Everybody's Nancy.
Linda, there's someone behind you.
Must be the hug I gave him.
That'll do it.
Thank you.
God,
My name is Sheila Reese, and I just have a question. I'm relatively new to the Hartford Board of Education, but it just seems like the basics are being missed. And what I mean by the basics, I mean, we talk about parent engagement, we talk about all of these other things outside of the educational realm that directly impacts the education of the kids. Like transportation, that has been a problem ever since I needed transportation for a student. And it's not just me, it's something that has been long-standing. For example, it's commonplace at least a couple of times a week for the school bus to get the kids to school late. This has been brought up at board meetings, it has been brought up at the school level, and when you go to the next board meeting, there's no follow-through on the progress, how it's being addressed, if it's being addressed. There just seems to be none of that. And then the whole tiered thing with this school starts at this time and that school starts at a different time and a third time, and the reason we do that, I was told, is because there's not enough school buses to go around, and then we only contract with one bus company because that's the way it's always been done, instead of being open to new ways of doing things as things change with all of the autonomy and magnet schools and neighborhood schools and so forth. It just seems to be that we're getting so wrapped up in all of these other things with the different types of schools, with the autonomy that each type of school has. There's no uniformity, and there's just no process. So it's not that parents don't have the wherewithal to navigate. It's just that everything is so convoluted until it just makes navigating almost impossible, even for the board itself.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. What is your question? Who are you directing it to?
I'm directing it to the board in terms of processes and so forth, and things that you're saying, understanding what the board's position is, what the board does. So what's going on with that, seeing as it's such a long-standing problem?
Okay. Now, none of the members of this panel are on the board.
Okay.
This is really talking to folks who are thinking about becoming board members or just educating the public. But let's deal with some of the questions that she's raised in terms of the policy implications and following through on issues, and especially if they've been repeatedly brought up. Andrea, will you tackle that?
So I don't know that the district has a transportation policy per se. And I know when I was on the board, we had 2 separate contracts with bus vendors, one for regular education, one for special education. I don't know if that's still the case.
That's still the case.
That is still the case, okay. So there are 2. Willie Mae Moses headed up transportation. She recently retired. I know that is a Herculean task. We've got, 32 schools, and trying to figure out how to get 25,000 students where they need to be on a daily basis. I'm not even going to profess to say how that might be done better. I have heard the concerns about kids not getting to school on time, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at. From a board standpoint, I'm not sure what kind of policy we can develop other than to trust that the people that are working for the district in that regard are putting their best foot forward in terms of developing a transportation plan. I will say that I think part of the problem more recently has been with the school closures, and as we've undergone this sort of school construction and facade improvements, students at MD Fox were being shipped all the way over to Twain. Thank you. And so that's all the way across town, so that's got to have an implication in terms of time and schedule. And that's happened, district-wide in terms of schools closing. I don't think there's an easy answer, but I encourage people to continue to push, to push at the meetings, to push the district to be more responsive, because I know especially when the school year starts, to see kids standing outside waiting for a bus for an hour, that's unnerving for me as a parent when that's not my child.
And I would take it from another viewpoint. If we say we have a school system of choices, I think it's important that we have excellent choices, good choices, otherwise we don't have choice. I also think it's important that if we really want to have choice and themes, that our students have the ability to get to some of these other places that are not neighborhood schools. So I think that speaks in part to some of the things that Sheila Reese was talking about. But I think we have time for several more. Yes, you will be next. Okay.
Hello, my name is Karen Taylor, and I'm a Hartford resident. I have twins who unfortunately do not attend Hartford Public Schools. They actually go to crack magnet schools, but I live in the North End, and I still am very concerned about the children in my neighborhood. And my question is primarily, I guess, for...
Yes, I have 25,000 students in Hartford, so it's okay that your children go to someplace other than a Hartford public school. They're all our children.
Our children, awesome.
Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. I think my question is primarily for Candida and Andrea, and anyone else actually who has information. Like Mr. Reese was saying, that there was an issue with transportation. If a parent has a specific concern about an issue that's going on within their school, how do they get policy implemented? Like, what does that look like as far as chain of command? Like, I have this issue, I have my Board of Education representative, I'm assuming, for the neighborhood. Like, what does that look like for someone who isn't knowledgeable about that process?
Who would like to take that? Candia?
You have different venues, to follow. I think that when there's an issue that is more germane to the administration of the school system, you go to the administration and voice your opinion. If you see that there's no change, then you bring that issue to the Board of Education. I think it's important that the numbers speak loudly than one individual. That if the issue is really a heavy issue, important to you, that you bring others with you and that you voice, that concern loudly with others, representing the issue. So you have to persist because there are, you have no idea how much information board members have to process on a daily basis. Sometimes, we're looking at the tip of the iceberg, but I remember meetings that would run overnight because we were making decisions along the way on issues that were time sensitive. And there's a lot that you have to be aware of, and there are a lot of issues that are brought in front of you. So you have to be persistent. You have to make sure that you follow through with the proper, individuals. You have that representative on the board that's there again to voice your concerns. So you have to continue, to pursue that issue until you see it resolved.
Okay, Linda, I promise this young lady the next question. Yes.
Get me uncomfortable. I don't think I'm here. Yes. Oh, okay.
Could stand up and give us your name.
My name is Susan Tana, and I work for the neighborhood organization Vecinos Unidos. And I wanted to get back to that thing about the funding for parents' engagement from Title I. Being around for a while, and I heard a lot about training parents and stuff like that. And we are in 2013, and we, don't have parents in the Board of Education and stuff being running the board, the board of Education. So I'm wondering. I know there is a lot of organizations that working on education, and I wonder what role all these organizations are. And how they communicate with each other to find out about, make sure that this money doesn't get back, if it goes back. The parents do know that this funding is there and they should be able to utilize it. So what is the miscommunication? How can that be improved? I mean, who's supposed to do what in terms of community and getting parents engaged and how we all work together? Because it's really kind of messy for me, what's going on.
Okay, who would like to take that? Bob?
Yes, there are many organizations, and we work at different levels. My organization works statewide. We're glad to come in and help a district, help do a workshop like this, encourage people to run. But there are also lots of other organizations on a much more grassroots level. You have a list of them on the things that were given out today by the people putting this on. So it's a little hard to coordinate, but you might want to go to a specific school that you're concerned about and ask them, well, what groups are involved? And maybe, again, I always go back to the School Governance Council because that's what they're set up to do, to help bring the concerns of the neighborhood to the school.
Also, I would just add that the Board of Education starts out its sessions with a public session. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that Sheila Reese comes often, and Cordulis, et cetera, and others. So that's an opportunity. And I know it's frustrating at times when you ask the same question over and over and don't get an answer. And I think that was part of the root of your question, Sheila, correct? Okay, I think we have time for two more questions. Here, and then you will have the last question all the way in the back. Yes.
Hi, my name is Bianca, and I'm also an intern for the Community Voter Project.
I'm sorry, you're what?
an intern for the community.
All right, and where are you in school, or where did you finish?
I'm actually starting at UConn.
Excellent. What year are you?
I'm a freshman.
That's fine. Where did you go to high school?
Weathersfield High.
That's okay too. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is guided more towards the parents. A lot of students feel that they're being taught to test instead of being taught to learn, and I just wanted to know what parents were doing, I guess, to change that in schools so that teachers were, I guess, teaching more skills that will be retained instead of just kind of forgotten after they take a standardized test.
You want to take that? Tiana, would you like to speak to that?
I mean, the testing is the bane of my existence. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm someone who's gone.
Have you lied previously, Tiana?
No.
Okay, good. Fine.
I've gone through many
That's
tests,
good.
from the bar exam to the LSAT. So I hate tests, but unfortunately, it is a necessary or supposedly necessary evil. One small thing that I've done is come in and teach lessons in my child's classroom on like multiculturalism, community mapping, just things that are really applicable and practical skills that I feel students are not getting because we're so focused on the test. I think that's one thing parents can do, where you see a void in the learning and you can try to, in your extra time, but I mean, it really is gonna have to be a policy decision that's made at the state level. I mean, I didn't do well on those tests, and I think I did okay, after high school. So I don't really know so much about the validity of the correlation between, how well you do on a test and that being a predictor of your ability to succeed. We need to be teaching our children how to survive in this 21st century, in this global economy, how to speak intelligently in front of an audience, how to, appear in an interview, things that they really need to survive, not sitting down. I mean, the test stresses me out as a parent, and I'm not the one taking it. And so I do hope as, more parents become involved and we start to get the results back that tell us, is this truly the way we need to be teaching our children? As more data comes about and we make the decisions based on that data, I hope things will change in that regard.
In my opinion, all systems evolve or they die. And one of the systems that tend to evolve more slowly than the other systems is the educational school system. I mean, we have the tendency to operate in a somewhat archaic way, and because we've been doing business this way, we will continue to do business this way. And you see with Montessori programs that if you work on teaching the child critical thinking, leadership, the math and the science comes almost automatically. So we put too much emphasis on teaching these kind of technical aspects of the education of and growth and development of a human being. We forget that these kids are human beings growing and developing, and we fail to do that and change the approach. We're still cutting the tail of the fish, even though we have a bigger pan, frying pan. So we have that's something that I've been critical of the system forever. It takes too long to change.
And one thing I learned is that parents can opt out. So, you can opt out as a parent. You can do that. Teachers hate when I tell parents that, but you can do it. I mean, funding for the school is tied to the test, and I have all kinds of conspiracy theories about that, but, it's unnecessary. Like I said, it's not something that children have to go through. And
I actually
Nancy?
don't think that teachers prefer to issue tests. I think they would much rather approach it from an experience. Yeah, exactly. They would prefer to teach and give their students a more holistic skill set. So
No, at the end, it's getting out of control. People are just speaking up without checking in with the moderator. Let's just get it. We just have a few more minutes to go. I'm now calling on Nancy. Nancy, please.
I just want to point out to something that we all have a voice. And if you have a concern, I'd like to call on you to really stand with your peers and your parents and your community and, bring that up to the Board of Education. Because if it's a concern, obviously you've experienced your stress of testing, you have a voice. Instead of you asking us or asking a panel what to do, I like to see you sitting where I am.
I love that challenge. The last question is in the back, Linda. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Diana, and my question is, we have large epidemics that are growing within the city of Hartford. Two of them is the homelessness and our children in the juvenile justice world. How do you embrace a parent or create a comfort zone so that a child or children's education aren't tarnished?
Andrea, I'm going to ask you to tackle that, given that you have been on the local board and now you sit on the state board, and you are just, I know you just got on there, but,
Right.
okay.
So, I think, I'm pretty sure the Hartford Public Schools actually has an initiative that is specifically designed for homeless children. Yeah, you're shaking your head no, but I'm pretty sure there is. Okay.
That's why I asked the question.
Okay, so but I don't think that means that there's not an initiative. I think what I'm saying is that there is an initiative, and if it's not working, then again, that's where the community mobilizes and holds the district accountable for it. As far as juvenile justice, I mean, one of the things that I'm hoping to address as a State Board of Education member is the triggers for expulsion in particular. Suspension and also, but more expulsion. In the school where I worked, there was a student who was expelled for something that didn't even happen on school property, and because of the way the legislation is written, the child was automatically expelled for a year. He's going to the HALO program, which is 3 hours of learning, allegedly. And so I worry for him about what that extra time is going to look like. I was actually surprised going back to the homelessness, I was surprised to find out how many homeless children we have. So if it's not working, it's because we're just not doing it the right way, and we need to, I think sometimes we want to push aside those uncomfortable realities, you know, and I think that's one of them. But I think we have children who are homeless, who are graduating, who are going on to do really wonderful things. So I think rather than make that the conversation we don't want to have, we really need to figure out a better way to address that population and make sure that they have the supports that they need. And I hope that your child got through it. And well, good, I'm glad, because you know, I think Candida said this earlier, you know, and Nancy as well, you know, it's about the children. I had a conversation with somebody a few days ago, and he said, that's what I really like about you. You still think it's supposed to be about the kids. I'm like, well, who? If not the kids, then who? So yeah, but I'm glad to hear that your child got through it, and you know, just keep holding the district accountable.
This ends our conversation for tonight, but it absolutely does not end the conversation. This conversation needs to continue. We need, several of our panelists have said it, we must continue to hold those responsible for educating our kids accountable. And that means more of us. And I'm speaking now to the television audience especially because you are here. We need to show up and we need to hold our officials accountable, because there's still too much disparity. There's still too much inequality. But thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank the TV audience for tuning in. I have in my hand, for those of you in the audience, a feedback form. Please fill this out before you leave, so it will give us some idea as to what we could do to make this program and similar programs even better. I often moderate programs for the Hartford Public Library, so I'm making an appeal to please be kind, because I enjoy doing this. Let's thank all of our panelists again. Thank you. Thank you, and good night, and safe travels.
Don't forget to vote.